I've returned on a channel that actually has my name on it. I'm Nerd King, it's the golden age of challenge runs on YouTube, and I thought it was time for me to try one out. Skyrim is a massive world, but even it starts to get boring eventually. Plenty of people have made Skyrim challenge runs, but I think they haven't gone far enough. Instead of just banning a few mechanics like killing, I decided to take things to the next level. See, there's a super secret start menu tab hidden in a secret location. It's basically only ever used by challenge runners, but it gave me a genius idea for the ultimate Skyrim challenge run. The goal of the run is to complete the main storyline of the game with as many counters in this menu at 0 as possible. If we can't do that, we will try to minimize the number for that counter. That said, I do have to throw a couple counters out since minimizing any one of them would be a challenge run of its own. Specifically skills learned, since it makes the game impossibly difficult. Days passed because many of my strategies to beat the game require a large amount of time, and shouts shouted for reasons I'll explain as we go. So to make up for these losses, I'll be playing the entire game on Legendary. Additionally, the main goal of this run is to have as many counters read 0 as possible by the end of the story. So given the choice between losing a 0 and increasing a minimum by 1, we'll be increasing a minimum. Anything that doesn't trigger a counter is allowed, but I am terrible at abusing glitches, so I didn't use any. I will keep track of the number of zeros we didn't get using this counter of failure. The first choice we have that will affect the game is which race to play. I knew going in that we will die fairly easily, so I chose Bretons for their magic resistance. But that was a huge mistake. Some races start with more spells than just flames and healing, and each spell other than flames and healing increments the spell's learned counter. To avoid this, it is necessary to choose a race that doesn't know any extra spells, leaving us with the following options: Argonian, Imperial, Khajiit, Nord, Orc, Redguard, or Wood Elf. Which you choose between these is mostly up to you, but I wouldn't recommend Imperial. Gold earned is a counter, and the Imperial racial ability is all about getting more gold. Personally, I chose Wood Elf for the improved archery and stealth skills. We play through normally until we have to choose between Hadvar or Ralof. I chose Ralof since the only opportunity for heavy armor before leaving Helgen requires us to leave with Ralof. However, I was wrong. When I first started the run, I assumed we would be using heavy armor, but good heavy armor is actually fairly difficult to come by on the main storyline. Keep in mind, items crafted and gold earned are both counters, so we can't buy or make any armor. It turned out I was able to get much more mileage out of the light armor, not only because of the better movement and sneak, but also because in the main story, elven armor is plentiful and amongst the strongest we'll have access to. Light armor is accessible traveling with either Hadvar or Ralof, but Hadvar is a much better fighter. The main quest can have issues if we escape without killing either of them, and we can't actually hurt anyone without risking the people killed in assault counters. So waiting around and letting them kill everyone is the easiest way. Let him do all the fighting, grab as many arrows as possible, and escaping Helgen is easy. Then I hunted down a mud crab. The plan was to raise my block, restoration, and light armor to the maximum possible level by letting this crab slowly beat me to almost dead, then fully healing myself with the restoration spell we start the game with. Now I am truly ready to save the world.
You forgot! Almost every enemy in the game gets stronger as you level, and that they get stronger faster than you. All your training actually makes the game more difficult. I don't know. You could keep grinding until your level got really high and you outscaled the NPCs, but you're locked out of all the major magic skills, almost all the stealth skills, and even some of the warrior skills, making gaining that many levels impossible.
We go down to Riverwood, but be careful not to discover any places, especially the standing stones. It's easy to stumble onto them accidentally, and we can't take any standing stone powers this run, so just follow the main path until we see them, then cut through the trees. Go ahead and discover Riverwood, though we will have to later anyway, and talk to the relative of whoever we escaped Helgen with. They will tell us to head to Whiterun, but ignore them. It'll save a lot of time if we head straight to Bleak Falls Barrow from here. Now is probably a good time to talk about the main mechanics of this run as opposed to a normal playthrough. First, saving. Just saving when we are about to quit is not good enough. We will be saving constantly. In theory, this run is beatable without saving, but on my blind run, there were just too many ways to fail without even knowing it. To minimize the amount of replaying we have to do, it is a good idea to A, be checking our general stats counters often, and B, use a specific saving system. First, we will want 2 temporary save files. These save files are for when we are active in combat. Fights can take a long time, and one mistake is usually death. If you are wondering why we need 2 saves and not just one, it is because when a save is loaded, there is a brief amount of time where it is impossible to move. If we are about to get hit by something that deals lethal damage, we will be unable to avoid it. Also, as speedrunners know, saves in Skyrim aren't always the same when loaded. For example, I save when an arrow comes at me, and after I unpause, it misses me. But when I reload my save, it hits me. You will probably run into this at some point, and it can ruin a save file. We will also need some landmark saves at various points throughout the game. Make sure you are checking your counters every so often, and if you notice a counter is increased, load a landmark save to figure out what went wrong. Alright, that is dandy, but how do we actually progress? 99% of the time, the answer is running. Lots of running. Even in heavy armor, almost all enemies we encounter are slower than us, so running usually works. In Bleak Falls Barrow, the thieves at the beginning are easily run past, but down the rotating ramp there are 2 skeevers. Skeevers are the most dangerous non-boss in the game. They are faster than us and they carry disease, which, if we are unlucky enough to get infected, increments the diseasified counter. Luckily, this is the only time on the main quest they appear. Almost everything in the game increments a counter when we kill it, including skeevers, so killing them is not an option. Even though they are faster than us, I still recommend running. We save before entering, and when they are on us, we sprint. When we see the webs, we equip flames. Make sure to start burning down the web as soon as it is in range to move through as fast as possible. Run past the spider and use flames again to free Arvel the Swift. Hopefully, the skeevers will get distracted fighting the spider. If they don't worry. Sprint down the hallway to the Draugr and abuse the spike trap in the room to kill them off and hopefully hit a Draugr. We don't have to worry about the Draugr too much, but we do have to use them to make Arvel into a corpse for us. When Arvel is dead, grab his claw and sprint to the swinging axes. If the last trap didn't kill the skeevers, this one should, but the axes also carry disease, so watch the upper left side of the screen when walking through to make sure we don't get infected. The rest of the Draugr can be run through easily. Note that here, we can close the gate behind us, which prevents the previous room's Draugr from following us. In the last combat area before the boss room, I recommend doing this jump off the stairs to avoid being caught in a bottleneck. Don't knock down any oil lanterns, at least one is necessary for the next boss, and leaving as many up as possible gives us more room for error. When we get to the puzzle door room, we close the door behind us and immediately sneak. Before entering the boss room, we wait an hour to restore all our health and magicka. Finally, we reach the first boss fight. Using a mix of bows, magic, and running like a coward, we slowly grind down his health. Like, really, really slowly. I also have to mention that we can't sneak attack without triggering multiple counters, so make sure to only fire arrows when standing. Even once we do lower his health enough, we can't kill him ourselves or we will increment the Draugr killed counter. Fortunately, behind us, there's a massive room of deadly traps. We just lead him into the massive room of deadly traps, drop a lamp to his head, and the fight is over. The lamp is easier because it does much more damage, but if you already destroyed the lamp, you can always use the nearby swinging axes. We could use them for the whole boss fight, but I can't get through them without taking damage, so I stuck with the million arrow plan. The downside to this plan is that there are still Draugr swarming the room with the traps we need, so after dropping the first lamp, I recommend jumping off the bridge to avoid the bulk of the Draugr. Unfortunately, there is some bad news. The dungeon's cleared counter completes as soon as we trigger the word wall, and the Draugr with the Dragonstone won't wake up until we do. This means that we have to complete this dungeon and therefore increment the dungeon's cleared counter. We could bring the golden claw that we have no further use for to this innocent store owner who was the original owner, but side quest completed is a counter, so we'll just drop it here instead. When we take the Dragonstone to Whiterun, a guard tries to bar our entry. Do not persuade, bribe, or intimidate him. These are all counters, but fortunately, if you talk to the relative back in Riverwood, you unlock this option. Since security protocols in Whiterun are really lax, they let you through without even noticing that you aren't really from Riverwood and that you are a wanted criminal. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a way to avoid discovering Dragon's Reach or Whiterun. Dragon's Reach is probably necessary anyway, but discovering Whiterun is a shame because the only thing we do here is walk to Dragon's Reach. We could avoid discovering Whiterun by committing a crime and being taken to jail, which is close enough to Dragon's Reach to avoid discovering Whiterun, but committing crimes would cause these zeros to become not zero, which would be really unfortunate since these are some of the easiest zeros in the game. The game plays as normal until it is time to fight Murmunir? One sec. Okay, till it's time to fight Mirmulnir. We have to trigger the guard's dialogue to make the dragon appear, but we can't do that without adding yet another location to the list. During the fight itself, you have to hide a lot, but if you only hide, Mirmulnir will just kill everyone and regenerate all his health. Make sure you are shooting as many arrows as possible into Mirmulnir when he is distracted with other people, and avoid his fire at all costs. It is instant death. Make sure to let someone else kill him. He is considered a creature for the creatures killed counter. Once he is dead, absorb his soul, but do not shout. Number of shouts is a counter, and while it ends up being a really high number, we may as well avoid shouting for no reason. As a quick note, the main way we get items is by looting dead bodies, but do not loot this chest. We can't even look in chests, and this thing, which is obviously a chest, is a chest. So if you were to somehow mistake this chest for a lootable body, do not loot it. It is a chest. So far everything has been fairly close, so I didn't mention it, but the most painful part of this run is about to hit full force. Prepare yourself for walking. It isn't really difficult, but we have to keep locations discovered to a minimum, and we can't gain or spend gold for carriages, so the main mode of transportation on this run is walking. Don't forget to save often. The only thing worse than walking from Whiterun to High Hrothgar is dying and having to do it again. My advice is to go to the signpost near Whiterun stables and just follow the signs in the direction of Ivarstead. You have to veer off from time to time to avoid discovering locations, and you may have to run from the occasional enemy, but for the most part it is easy walking. High Hrothgar is pretty uninteresting. I couldn't find a way to avoid any of the shouts they want you to do, so just do as they say. Just be careful not to shout at them, or you may trigger the assault counter. The Horn of Jorgen Windcaller quest is incredibly difficult and then incredibly easy. When you enter, there are mages fighting Draugr. We sprint past them immediately while they are focused on each other. After the fighting Draugr and mages, there is a room full of Draugr. This is the hard room, but with a lot of luck we can squeeze past. After that, there are just a couple enemies that can be easily run past, and then we get to this room. This room is a problem. The developers want us to run through these stone things, then use whirlwind sprint to get past the gates. I couldn't find a way to avoid shouting here, or more accurately, I can find a way, but it is even worse. It's possible to use a companion to trigger the gates, but we can't have followers. Even if we could, we would need to get Lydia through all the early rooms without letting her kill anyone, since some followers, especially optional ones, will increment our killed counter even if they did all the killing. So I resigned myself to shouting our way through the gates. No more difficult parts, we can just walk in and grab the note. Wait. We can't grab the note without incrementing the book's red counter, and there is no way to progress without reading the note to find Delphine. Requiescat in pace book's red counter. It is time for the hardest non-Alduin dragon fight. Delphine stole our horn to get us to show up, but we have to fight a dragon so she will trust us. She's a great ally. Unlike the Myrmolnir fight, Solaknir is battled in a large open area. Here are some tips. Do not hurt Solaknir until after he aggroes you. If you fire too early, it counts for the purposes of the assault counter. You can run down the cliff if you need to get out of the way of fire. The large rock on the left is effective cover, but sometimes his fire can still kill you even behind it, so use it carefully. Like the guards in the Myrmolnir fight, Delphine doubles as a distraction for a dragon and a person other than you who can deal the final blow. When Delphine wants us to go to the Thalmor embassy, we run into a major issue. In order to sneak into the embassy, she wants us to give all the items we will need to this guy. Like the scorched body, this guy is obviously a chest. Even if we could give him items, it would be pointless, since we have to open a chest in the embassy to get those items back. This means we all have to either work without gear, or get new gear inside. Also, Delphine takes any items we have in our inventory when we leave. But don't worry, they are stored nice and safely in this chest. Without chests, there's no way to guarantee we keep all our stuff, but if you put all your items in a dead body and come back after the quest, most of your stuff should still be there. I recommend going to the Western Watchtower and using one of the dead guard bodies from the Myrmolnir fight. We attend the party, just have this guy make a distraction for you as normal, but once we are inside, we have to run past the guards. If we run to this door and stealth immediately after getting outside, the inside guards won't follow. We make a mad dash to the courtyard to that building and use the same trick to make sure the outside guards don't follow us. Once inside the building, though, things get really problematic. First, we need to get down into the torture room. I could only find two options. Either we lockpick the door, or get the key from a chest. Either way, we lose a 0. Between these, opening the chest is definitely preferable. We will probably have to open one more chest later on anyway. I imagine there is probably an out-of-bounds glitch or something that could get us through, but I have no clue what it would be. Once we do make it into that chamber, we run into another tricky situation. In order to escape, we need a key from one of the guards that enter. We can't pickpocket the key, which leaves killing them as our only option. Unfortunately, my camera was off during this part. I can tell you that since we don't have armor, decent weapons, levels, or anything else that would give us a fighting chance, the best way is to let them do the fighting for us. One of them summons a Storm Atronach to try and kill us. Fortunately, the Storm Atronach doesn't really care what it kills, so if it can't see you, it will just attack whoever is unfortunate enough to be within reach. We just run around until they summon the Atronach, don't kill anyone, and don't hit them until they hit us. Once the Atronach is summoned, hide in the corner. When everyone is dead, we just grab the key, sprint past the frost troll in the tunnel, and we are done. Don't forget to fast travel back to the body with all your stuff as soon as possible. The longer it sits there, the more of your stuff will disappear. It turns out that while Delphine thought the Thalmor might know why the dragons were returning for some vague political reason, the Thalmor thought that the Blades might know why the dragons were returning because they're the last surviving scholars on dragons. Delphine will send you to go get Esbern in the Ratway before the Thalmor find him. To do that, we need to head to Riften. First, getting past the guards at the front without persuading or bribing them. Avoiding their dialogue is actually pretty easy. Just go around the side and enter through this door. They won't bother you after you've already entered the city, so just make sure not to discover the tables and getting in his cake. If you know where he is and how to get there, finding Esbern in the Ratway is easy too. Just run past the enemies straight to Esbern. If you haven't been through many times though, it is a dark and confusing mess that can easily have you running in circles. With all the enemies behind us, getting lost can be deadly. We get a nice break when we reach Esbern. Make sure to wait at least an hour to de-aggro any enemies that followed you. The way back with Esbern is slower, but he is a strong follower who can freely kill almost anyone in the Ratway for you. Let him do the fighting and there shouldn't be any issues. I did have to run through this part twice after accidentally getting a person killed counter on my first try. I'm still not sure why that happened, so make sure to watch your people killed counter when you are exiting the Ratway to avoid unnecessary replaying. With Esbern safely returned to Delphine, we travel to Karspire. What do you mean you don't know what Karspire is? Oh, right, no one actually plays this far into the main story. There's a giant temple. The temple itself is easy, but we do have to open a chest to get past this blood seal thing. What is important to note here, though, is that there is always a dragon near the entrance. It will be distracted by the nearby Forsworn. If you need to get some skill points for your archery, just shoot arrows into the dragon while it is distracted. Just don't kill it or absorb its soul, and be careful. If it decides it would rather attack you than the Forsworn, things tend to end badly. It's time to meet Paarthurnax at the throat of the world. We reached the Clear Skies section, and I found no way to get up without using Clear Skies. To find Septimus, they want us to ask the College of Winterhold or the Blades. But it's easiest to just ignore that and head really far north until we just sort of bump into Septimus's hideout. It's actually easier to find than you might think. Just get as close to Winterhold as you can without walking into it, and head towards that giant ice field. The enemies are pretty easily avoided, so it should be more than safe enough. Septimus wants us to go and take the lexicon to Mizark and get it inscribed. Welcome to your nightmares. Mizark is the hardest dungeon on the main run, but is also probably one of the most fun. We can't kill any enemies, and this place is swarming with some of the hardest enemies to sneak past in the game. Falmer elves and Dwemer creations. First, I recommend knowing the route you are going to take ahead of time. Avoiding enemies is much easier when you aren't constantly bumping into dead ends and wondering where you are. Making some tricky jumps off the tower helps avoid the Falmer who are on the ramp. Sneak when you can, run when you can't, and turn the Falmer and the Dwemer security against each other for bonus points. Honestly though, it will just take a lot of attempts. The puzzle room at the end is devoid of enemies, so once you make it there, just solve the lexicon puzzle and get the dragon elder scroll. Whew, that was difficult. I sure am glad things get easier from here. It's not like we have to face, Alduin while the sky shoots meteors at us or anything. Sigh. We'll need to prepare for this. Head back to Karspire, where one of the side rooms holds Dragon's Bane. We don't need to discover any new locations to get it, and it's the strongest melee weapon we will have access to in this run, especially for fighting dragons. Second, we will need way more arrows. I am level 10 for this fight, so Alduin has 2,362 health and has a special ability that causes us to do half damage to him. I deal about 12 damage per steel arrow I fire from my Forsworn bow. He regenerates health over time, and this fight takes a while. So by my math, we will need about 1,000 arrows. That is more than we can get by looting random corpses. Don't worry though, I have a plan. Fast travel to Solitude and go to where the guards train. We can take arrows from this target. Normally we would pickpocket an extremely high quality arrow on them so they would use it and not the weak little steel arrows, but we aren't allowed to pickpocket. The target only lets about 14 arrows get stuck in it before they start despawning, so take 14 arrows at a time until you have at least 1,000 steel arrows. I tried finding a bow that deals more damage as well, because our Forsworn bow is pretty weak, but the only ones I could find would have required us to either craft, open a chest, complete a side quest, or discover a location. The best option would be Bow of the Hunt in Clearspreen Tarn, which only requires one found location and is a pretty good bow, but I think the Forsworn bow will be just good enough with sufficient attempts. The Alduin vs. Paarthurnax battle was when I had to officially give up on minimizing the shouts counter. I started the fight by climbing to the very top of the Throat of the World. This way we can line up our archery and shouts as well as possible. Actually, although Paarthurnax feels differently, it does seem like this fight might be doable without Dragonrend, although it would be very difficult. Most of the time Paarthurnax has Alduin distracted and everything is fine, but occasionally Alduin shows up to hit us with his fire breathing. We have two options to avoid instant death. Either jump off the mountain or use Dragonrend on him. Jumping off the mountain is remarkably inconsistent, since many parts of the mountain don't actually block his flames and sometimes you just fall off the mountain instead of down it. But if it were just Dragonrend, I wouldn't have given up. However, during the fight, Alduin uses a shout that causes meteors to fall from the sky. It is extremely easy to die to said meteors. The only way I found to avoid allowing the sky to fall on our heads is to use Clear Skies to remove the effect entirely. The problem is that I basically need to use two shouts at once in this fight. Clear Skies to stop the meteors, and Dragonrend to keep us from becoming Rostovaking. If Alduin tries to breathe fire on us right after we used Clear Skies to remove the meteors, it usually means certain death. On the other hand, if we use Dragonrend on Alduin, and the skies aren't cleared of doom rocks, we will be too busy dodging meteors to get any decent damage. For these reasons, the fight is a balancing act. Only ever use the first word of Clear Skies. It clears the meteors just as well, but has a significantly shorter cooldown. You can try and get some cheap shots while Alduin is in the air, but it's easier to hit him after he's been Dragonrended. Once he is really, really low on health, we can just charge in and finish him off with our melee attacks. The melee with Dragonbane actually deals way more damage, but it is also almost certain death if we don't finish him off quickly, so make sure to finish him off on this charge. With Alduin under our belt, it is time for peace treaty negotiations! The quest requires we discover the Palace of Kings, which is a pain since our closest starting points are either Riften or Whiterun. It is not difficult though, and we don't even have to discover Windhelm if we enter through the back. Actually, this whole quest is technically optional if we do the Civil War quest first, but that would involve discovering quite a few locations and probably some other issues as well. Now we've finished single-handedly dictating national politics, we summon a dragon to the Great Porch. It feels scary, but if you stay out of the way and let the guards get eaten first, he'll eventually follow you into the trap and fly you into the main storyline's last dungeon. We land outside. No enemies will bother us until we try and cross the bridge. As soon as that happens though, a dragon will try and kill us when we are totally exposed and the entire path is blocked by Draugr. The good news is there are actually two safe spots along the path we can hide at that will allow us to take a break and recover health. The first one is in this giant building. Don't actually explore it. It's a pretty pointless building and it's full of Draugr, but we have a clever trick to use it as a safe spot. See, the game developers don't want you to immediately die when loading an autosave. So if we enter the building, immediately load the autosave that was created when we entered, all the enemies will de-aggro. We just have to immediately use our sneak and we can hang out as long as we want. Unfortunately, we can't use our wait button to restore all our health because there are enemies right nearby, so we'll just take advantage of good old-fashioned real-world waiting. When you are ready and hopefully have saved, go make a run for a nearby crumbling building. It isn't as safe as where we were, but you can still hide there before making a dash for the indoor section of the dungeon. When we get inside, use the autosave load trick to de-aggro the enemies in the entry. The dungeon's real challenge is an extremely dangerous puzzle room. The first room has approximately 6 Draugr directly guarding the pillars we have to activate. The code we need is whale? Dolphin? Fish? Whatever this symbol is. We sneak as close as we can, then run around like chickens hoping their heads won't get chopped off. You will have to improvise a little, but don't forget you can backtrack and run around if you need the Draugr to get out of the way for a few extra seconds. Once the door opens, bolt through it and enter the most dangerous room in the game. Wait, you didn't think that last room was the super challenging puzzle room I was talking about, did you? No, after that puzzle room, there's another puzzle room. It is a much more enclosed space with just as many Draugr. The middle pillar should be set to snake, the left should be set to bird, and the right should be set to whale dolphinfish. It is basically the same idea, just with much less room for error. Run around triggering the pillars. If you run in large circles, triggering each pillar once as you run past, you can just barely avoid the enemies long enough to finish the puzzle and activate it with the lever in the center. The next room isn't too bad. It isn't easy, but with enough tries we can simply run through. The room is a good breakpoint to regenerate health and stamina. You can use the oil trap to kill a couple of the next room's Draugr, trigger the nearby lever, and go hide in your safe spot again. There is another boss fight with the Draugr Overlord that is almost identical to the Bleak Falls Barrow fight, just with a little less wiggle room. There is a convenient oil trap right nearby with a floor component the Draugr is capable of triggering. So run him over it and proceed to the dungeon's word room. Avoid the word, and walk outside to make a final dash to Sovngarde. We just wander blindly through the fog in Sovngarde until we stumble onto Tsun, the guardian of the Hall of Valor. He wants us to defeat him in a fair and honorable fight. Here is my first attempt at this. Here is my second attempt. It is pretty clear we aren't going to be able to beat him fairly. In my normal playthrough of the game, I one-shot him with a sneak attack, but obviously that won't work either because that would trigger a counter. Thanks to the spirit of irrational video game programming, however, we don't have to.
Soon, as one of the final challenges the Dovahkiin has to face, naturally has some of the worst AI in the game. It is incredibly easy to get him stuck on basically anything.
This means all we have to do is run a bit, get something between him and us, and we can just shoot arrows till we win. No sneak attacks, just a completely fair strategy of murdering helpless gods. Now that we are in the Hall of Valor, what remains is a glorified cutscene. The heroes of old force us to shout 3 more times, which feels like a slap in the face. And then we get to the final, legendary battle between the Dragonborn and Alduin. Who will triumph, we will. I won't go into detail, but it's actually much easier than the last Alduin fight. However, as anyone who has tried a pacifist run of Skyrim is well aware, there is one final roadblock. Alduin will not die to anything other than a direct hit from the Dragonborn. In fact, my guess is he is programmed to only die if the people killed counter is incremented. I and many others would love if a better solution is found, but till then, we have to kill Alduin by hand, completing the main quest and killing our 0 on the people killed counter. Well, now we just have to go back and celebrate our victory.
Not so fast. After killing Alduin, the game gives you a quest to go back to the mortal realm from Sovngarde. So, the main quest is over. Returning to the mortal realm is just a side quest, a sort of distraction from the main story.
Oh, well, that just leaves one option. I guess I'll just live in Sovngarde forever. With that, it's time to compute how well we did. I'm going to go section by section to make things less confusing. In the general section, we discovered 17 locations, cleared 2 dungeons, looted 2 chests, read 3 books for a general section score of 24, with days passed and skill increases being ignored. In the quest section, we did extremely well. The only quests we completed during the game were the 17 main quests, which I think would be fair to ignore. That would give us a perfect 0 on the quest section. In the combat section, we did nearly perfect. We only killed Alduin, giving us 0s for the people, animals, undead Daedra, and automations killed counters. We have a 1 on the creatures killed counter from Alduin, and then we successfully clean swept the combat section with 0 critical strikes, sneak attacks, backstabs, weapons disarmed, brawls 1, and, most importantly, 0 bunnies slaughtered. I thought we did pretty well so far, but unfortunately, the magic section is brutal. Most of the magic section is actually shout related, and they did not go well. We collected 2 dragon souls, one from Mjolnir and one from Solaknir. The Greybeards insisted on unlocking many shouts for us, including, specifically, Unstoppable Force, Clear Skies, Dragon Rend, Call Dragon, Whirlwind Sprint, and Breathe Fire, for a total of 6. These actually count twice because we both learned them for shouts learned and unlocked them for shouts unlocked, leaving us with 12. But they weren't done. No, not only does each distinct shout count twice, once for learning and once for unlocking, but there are 2 more separate counters for each word of each shout, which also count twice, once for having learned them and once for having unlocked them, for another 28 points. Each shout that we unlocked for all 3 words for also counts again, adding another 4. The only 0 from this whole section is the spells learned, which we somehow held on to. For the record, despite my intentions to try to avoid shouting, we actually still shouted 178 times, so I'm glad I decided not to count it. Crafting and crime were both beautifully desolate 0s though, which I am pretty thrilled about. Specifically, we didn't use any soul gems, trap any souls, make any magic items, improve any weapons or armor, make any weapons or armor, mix or use any potions or poisons, collect or eat any ingredients, find any nirnroot, or pluck the wings of any innocent butterflies. Actually, the crafting section was pretty easy since we didn't go out of our way to craft or collect ingredients. It pretty much took care of itself. The crime section was mostly easy since the game doesn't push you into committing crimes, but I am happy about a few of the tricky ones. It was surprisingly difficult to avoid assaulting anyone, as the game's definition of assault is pretty loose. I am also sort of surprised the trespasses counter is at 0, given that we trespassed at least once in the main quest, but I guess the game doesn't count breaking into the Thalmor Embassy as a crime? So, to wrap things up, we had no lifetime bounty, our largest bounty was 0, we picked neither lock nor pocket, we were never jailed, we didn't spend any time in jail, we paid no fines, we never escaped jail, we didn't steal nor pickpocket any items, we stole no horses, and we didn't murder, assault, nor trespass. Adding up all the sections, we got a grand total of 71 minimum points, which is just awful. To be fair though, about 60% of those points are from the magic section alone, almost all of which from shouts we had to use. As for the true goal of this run, the 0s, of the 86 counters in the game, 5 were considered not worth doing, specifically Days Past, Shouted, Main Quest Complete, and Skill Increases, leaving us with 81 counters we were actually trying to minimize. We were able to keep 69 of those counters, leaving 12 behind to await a better challenge runner. That leaves us at a roughly 80% success rate. It's not bad, but I would really love for someone to get above 90%. For that, we would have to keep 4 more zeros. Chest looted is the one that seems the most possible to me. It's not the closest to 0, but seems that with just a minimum amount of glitchy shenanigans, it might be possible. Other close counters are books read, Dragon Souls collected, and dungeons cleared. Whew. I know that the results got a little bit complicated there, but before I end the video, I wanted to go over a bit of semantics. There are actually 2 optional main quests. One is Season Unending, which, as I previously described, can't actually be avoided by the rules of the run. But I already secretly skipped the other one without you probably even noticing. Talking to Delphine and Esbern gives us the quest to kill Paarthurnax. This, if completed, increases the main quest counter. So the question is, does beating the game's main quest mean completing every possible main quest? If so, we have to kill Paarthurnax, which increases our people killed counter to 2. Or are we also trying to minimize the number of main quests we complete, in which case we should skip killing Paarthurnax regardless? If you do decide to kill Paarthurnax, it is worth noting that he is the absolute hardest fight on the main quest, because we lack any minions to distract him. Fortunately, with no meteors raining from the sky, we can carefully chain Dragon Wrens endlessly and fire arrows till he goes down. I did successfully do it, so either way the game is beatable with the same number of zeros. I know it's more complex than the challenges most challenge runners do, but playing the game this way was actually a lot of fun. If you want to try it yourself though, I would recommend allowing yourself to earn and spend gold. I didn't talk much about it, because there weren't really any obstacles to not earning gold, but having to walk everywhere all the time without leaving any discovered locations to fast travel to is extremely painful. I ended up spending so much time on this run just walking from place to place. Maybe sometime I'll do another challenge run, or maybe I'll try doing this run on another quest line. We'll see. But until then, sigh. I'll just be sad, waiting for you to watch my next video.